This is Joseph Stainsby for OmniRide at the Manassas Park City Hall. It is 9 a.m. on March the 16th, 2022. We are starting the listening session for the potential Manassas Park Microtransit study. Folks are entering the room, and we're taking some feedback, and we'll be answering questions. So the recording will continue. All right. Good morning, everyone. If it's impossible as you come in, we could ask you to sign in. We do kind of have to take attendance for these things. We also have my business card there, and there are copies of a presentation about the proposed service, if you would like. And City has been so gracious as to provide us with some crackers and water. So if you would like to partake, please do.
Great. Nice to meet you, sir. I'm with the city of Manassas. Okay. You guys don't have a lot of time. Now,
Probably how it would go. The bulk of the people who can get stuff would be my thought. And then we'll just see how it goes. Good morning.
Good morning. I think some people filter in.
Yeah. Yeah.
we actually.
This is a volunteer ride network. 4 counties. We have to Prince William.
I mean, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
but you know, there's a hope that it isn't. Right.
I mean, right, and that's things that from my I don't know how this is going to overlap with us, but I'm very curious.
Yeah.
We've had more hang out
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Is it like a
absolutely.
company?
Yeah, I'm kind of torn. I'm like,
So we can volunteer rides.
Yeah, don't stay on our account. We have.
we've done these things.
But we'll drive better. That's our grant, and so we love to drive nonprofit.
It's going to work. It's like commission approval. It's likely to be based.
Oh, you don't get it.
So like in November, you set the time.
Okay, so
Yeah, it gives us time to do promotion.
yeah, so it's like even trying to recruit someone. Right.
Supplemental hours.
Right, that's just like this week of right?
So it would have been, probably closer to like June, July time, but it's been pushed back to gather more time.
And then we had staff spending a whole week riding the route. Survey.
Well, as you guys get closer to the marketing piece, feel free to come through me.
I've actually spoken with Alyssa. I want to make sure I'm saying this right.
Is it what's Alyssa's last name?
Lud was that.
I spoke to her. She actually reached out and we were able to work with coordinating a flyer that she was get into water bills.
Wonderful.
So I know that was, like I said, I made the introduction. I know, well, that's my understanding. They're still working it out, but it's my understanding that they're going to be having something running in April.
Okay.
More of a little flyer, basically advertising them wanting to get out. I actually think it's the one that they're holding.
Oh yes, I mean, good morning, I'm Emily Braley. Nice to meet you. Manage NV Ride, the volunteer ride network of the area. Thanks for the work that you do, that's wonderful. Yeah, thank you. This is of interest. Thank you for coming. Yeah. I wanted to introduce myself too. I'm Melanie Hughes.
Absolutely. There's a lot of
I didn't know there was a volunteer ride network in the area, so that's good to know if you have a card. Yeah, I do, and I work with you guys at one in DC.
On the website, obviously.
We did it.
Oh, okay, well, they're not affiliated with us, because we're state, we're Virginia State, but yeah. What's your name? Jeanette. Super nice to meet you.
Yeah, we did a Facebook push the last couple of weeks, and they got a lot of hits on it with some comments, a lot of likes and loves and things like that. So we get a lot of positive feedback. And
yeah, I don't think many people would be.
Okay.
the only if
in the one in Manassas.
keep going, this is just the start.
It's great.
Last night we also served at city council.
Oh, good. That's okay. That's all my territory. So yeah, that would be great to
Take care of that last month. So I know that this is that one aspect. Now my next part is trying to get some scooters again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we can definitely take care of that one, my 10 years in regards of when we created it, everyone is
Right, because it's multiple. You do
Yeah, I'll
the
take
big
one for
bus,
you. I
and
work
then
with
so
Commercial Curry and
that
became
flexibility,
like
but
the
bikes,
micro
scooters gives that extra layer too. So whatever you can do to
Yeah,
minimize
he-
just car traffic.
collaborative, so not to meet
and
somebody
like I
from
said,
out
this
this
is
area.
what I was talking about, not only most
Yeah, oh well,
users are
you know,
also more
not all of us have the
that's a big
big
thing
cars,
that I
but
want to
you'll never lose that one.
You signing yet, right?
I sent you information.
Karen and Holly.
You haven't looked in email yet for it. Is
Yeah, you must have just sent it. 'Cause I didn't-
8:30.
Okay, yeah, I was driving.
The 50% plan on the condition center was presented to the box yesterday.
Oh, okay.
So I sent you. I went.
You know, I bet you guys
were keeping you guys out of the loop. So I went, let me fire that on.
Okay, thank you. I'll take a look.
so you and Joe,
And Karen and Holly.
Karen,
Holly.
the think tank.
Okay.
You guys all.
Okay.
So it's not
All right.
polarizing.
Okay.
Probably, because we've been around for like a while, and it's in that area, right?
Trevor.
Like it's-
Joe.
Joe, sorry.
What's up?
Just real quick. I think I
Oh, yeah, sure.
Loudon and Arlen. Yeah, so anybody over 55 or disability,
Right back.
wheelchair riders, yeah. Blindness, of course, we count, so no problem there.
Require a doctor.
They're not being tested, we self-supported. Yeah, as long as someone says I'm disabled or whatever, we don't really pursue that. It's not really we'll take what people say at face value. Yeah, so we provide volunteer rides through partner organizations. Like we don't provide the rides ourselves, we don't driving. This is of high interest because right now in Prince William we have veterans.
So, good morning, everybody. I want to officially just recognize a couple of housekeeping things. So, firstly, we are recording this session. We've recorded all of our sessions. The audio will be available on our website, omniride.com, probably tomorrow morning. This is the third actual type of these sessions that we've had. This one is going to be a little different than the other two. We did a previous session at the Manassas Park Community Center and then also at the City of Manassas Town Hall. And they were kind of much more straightforward presentation and feedback. This is meant to be a listening session. At this point, where we are in the process, this comes after about 9 months of outreach in terms of working with the board, riding the Manassas Park Route 68, doing rider surveys, doing these in-person events. And the purpose of this session, we do have copies of a presentation over here, but it's very light. And I've just put up here on the screen here an example of the proposed coverage zone of the microtransit pilot for folks who potentially hadn't seen it before. It is good today. I see a bunch of folks around the room who I actually haven't seen before, which is fantastic. So this is really, well, you're not included, Mr. Beveridge. Yes. So certainly some folks we've seen before. But this is meant to be an opportunity for you guys to give us your feedback on what you think of the service, right? So I'm not going to sit there, or stand here for that matter, and spend 20 minutes, half an hour going through the presentation. I will certainly give a very 40,000-foot overview of what we're proposing, but then the idea is that you folks make your comments. If you have questions about the service, I will address them right here. If you need to flow in and flow out, you can do that. We're here till 11 a.m. That's what we're doing today, okay? So this is kind of a new way of doing things for us. We'll see how it goes. So first things first, without going through the presentation, this is concerning the Manassas Park Local Route 68, which is the blue line there on the map. We were tasked by our board, I believe this was kind of in the early part of last year, but it's something that's been brought up for some time, to look at ways that we could potentially reinvigorate that route. It does not have a lot of ridership. It is the lowest performing route in terms of ridership of our local routes, okay? And so there were discussions about whether or not we should be looking to potentially right-size the service. Is it worth having a big, city bus driving around to, service this many people? And because of the way that the program is funded, anyone who takes the Route 68 in the room will know that the trip frequency is not particularly high on that route. It's every 90 minutes, okay? And it feeds back into the hub where you can collect in the 65 and the East-West Express. So it does provide a network, but the headways are not very good. And so one of the things that management, myself, Mr. Palestrant here, who I've been extremely derelict in not introducing, Perrin Palestrant, he's our Director of Planning and Operations. So go ahead and intro yourself.
Oh, yes. Good morning, everybody. I'm Perrin Palestrant. I oversee the planning and operations of OmniRide. I really appreciate you coming out here, taking the time to be with us. We've been doing a lot of research, riding the buses a lot, just getting out to the community, and we appreciate any comments that you have, any feedback, anything that we can do to answer questions, any thoughts that you may have that maybe we haven't thought of yet. This is an open dialogue for us, so we really appreciate what you have for us.
Yeah. And then, in really messing things up, I didn't introduce myself properly. I'm Joe Stainsby. I'm the Chief Development Officer for OmniRide. So I'm responsible for all things about moving us from, just kind of your classic fixed route transit company, which we are right now with our local and our commuter service, into bringing in more holistic elements like transportation demand management, looking at our telework, van pool programs, carpool programs, seeing if we can integrate slugging more, and then looking at potentially innovative things like microtransit where we can serve you guys better. All this information that we are gathering, and it's a substantial amount of information at this time, hours and hours of audio, looking at a petition that was done, contacting all of those folks, looking at the surveys, the feedback that we got from riding on the routes. All of this gets wrapped up into a big, very laborious to look at package for our June board meeting of this year, where we will propose that this is what we want to do. We want to move forward with a microtransit pilot on the Manassas Park local Route 68, and our commission will vote to approve it or not. If they vote to approve it, the service would probably end up going live in December of this year. It was originally meant to be earlier, but about 6 months ago when we presented our findings to the board, there were enough concerns that had been raised by the general public that they wanted us to go back and take a sharper look at it and have more time to garner people's opinions and see how we want it to go forward. So we will present it in June. They will make a decision up or down. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, right? But if it does happen, it would go live in December timeframe. That's what we anticipate at this current time. Because, after that, we're into the fiscal year 23, which starts in July, and we need time to be able to adjust our service around, train the operators on how to do the service, put the entire system together. So that's why there has to be a relatively significant lag time. So way back to where we were at the beginning, we were charged with looking at this as an opportunity to reinvigorate that service. Well, some of the main criticisms that we have about this route are how infrequent it is and where it picks up and where it drops off, right? So microtransit is fundamentally different than the service that operates on this route in a very important way, which is that it is on demand, right? If someone is not calling up to speak to one of our fabulous customer service agents, booking it through their laptop or using the app on their phone, the service isn't running, right? So it's inherently more efficient. You don't have a giant bus going around burning up stupidly expensive diesel at the current time and carrying around a bunch of people, having space to carry around a bunch of people without actually carrying them around. So because of that, it's inherently more efficient. And the advantage that you get with that is that it allows you to offer a much larger service footprint in a revenue neutral way. And that's the most critical thing, right? Because you could certainly have the Manassas Park Local 68 at 10-minute headways, but people would have to pay for 10-minute headways, right? And so we cut our coat according to our cloth, and that's not what we are able to do. So we can offer, service times with microtransit because it's demand response, and these vehicles would be, dispatched out of our freshly minted western facility over on Ballsford Road in Manassas, not coming from Woodbridge. You're talking much more in the 15 to 30 minute time frame where you're waiting for a bus, right? You're not booking it a day in advance like you are with paratransit or something like that. You would be booking the trip 30 minutes in advance of when you wanted to take it, right? And it would pick you up within this zone and take you within this zone, okay? Now the zone is geographically defined when we set up the service, so this can change over time, but the idea is, from an illustrative effect, is that it shows how much more into these neighborhoods it gets. You know, this is going to be something that would be run in, you know, if everyone's used to seeing metro access vehicles, right? You know, the big kind of chassis top vehicles. That's the type of vehicle we're talking about. So it's much more able to go into neighborhoods. The software that we're looking at still works on like as points of aggregation. So it's not really meant to be an explicit door-to-door service. It might make you come to the street corner, right? Come to the corner of this junction, but as opposed to the bus stops on the route, it's just massively more flexible than that, right? Now you might be in a place where, you know, you happen to be right at the bus stop, but it's going to service all of the bus stops that we have and many more virtual bus stops as well. So you're never going to be, you know, more than, you know, a tenth of a mile or something like that from where you would need to be able to pick up the service. That's the general idea, right? Because it does all of this stuff in the cloud for kind of efficient routing. So if there are two people, one second, Ray, if there are two people who are, you know, looking to, you know, one's here and one's here, it might have them both walk to here and have them get on at the same point. Okay, so that's the type of stuff that we're talking about. Obviously, with microtransit, you're using smaller vehicles. These are, you know, 15 passenger capacity vehicles. They have the ability to carry a lot less people, right? So if you ended up in a scenario where you suddenly had, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9 people looking to get on the van at any one time, that's really where microtransit ceases to be of good use, and it makes more sense to have a transit bus. We, and this is to allay another fear that people have, we are very much a bus company, right? I have been involved with the bus company for a long time. Perrin is very much a true believer in buses. He's all about buses. We are not looking at this as a way to get away from doing buses, right? Right now, the Manassas Park Local 68 does not have the ridership to continue in its current iteration, and we don't have anything smaller to move it to other than microtransit. So you get to the point where if the route doesn't perform better, right, using the money that we have right now, then we would potentially have to look at getting rid of the route because not enough people actually ride it. And this presents us with a way to potentially get more people onto the route, build the ridership, and if microtransit is a completely phenomenal success and suddenly, you know, 50 billion people decide that they actually really do want to use this route, we'll go back to blooming fixed route transit, right? It's not a one-way thing, right? There can be an ebb and a flow, and that's the advantage of something like microtransit because, you know, it does have the ability for you to set a zone or something like that. You know, you can move it around, right? If we are tasked with doing whatever is the most efficient thing that we can to be the best stewards of, frankly, all of your guys' taxpayer dollars, right? And so at the current time, we propose that is microtransit, right? And that will ultimately be approved or not by our commission, one of whom, Mayor Ishall, is in the room today, at our June board meeting. So very 40,000 foot view, that is what microtransit will be. I mentioned that you can book it by calling one of our customer service agents, like you would book a deviation or something today, through an app on your phone or through a website. All of those three things are how you would interact with this service, right? It's meant to be a much more flexible way of doing things, but it is fundamentally different than from you just rocking up to a bus stop at an appointed time and you get on the bus, right? There is that fundamental difference, and that, I think, has, as we have seen throughout the course of this information gathering process, that gives people some heartburn. Some folks it really does give them some heartburn because the idea of moving to an on-demand model is something that's kind of anathema to them. They feel as though they want to be able to go to a bus stop at an appointed time, and if you're booking it yourself, that, as opposed to empowering you and giving you flexibility, which is maybe what I would personally feel, they feel as though that makes them more beholden to a system, right? So if you're showing up time, it gives them more flexibility. They know what time it's going to be there, then whoop, they can go. So there is that difference, and I want to make that immensely clear. So from our perspective, again, I said I wasn't going to get into a long presentation because this really isn't to hear from me so much as it is to hear from you guys. So please, any questions? Go ahead.
You said that it's fundamentally different from buses, but it sounds like it's also fundamentally different from existing ride shares that we're familiar with, like Uber. It's not like you're going to be, calling somebody and 4 minutes later somebody's going to show up at your house.
Yeah, I would say that but if you crashed an Uber and a bus into each other, in my mind, that's what microtransit is like. That's what I'm seeing in my head. So I would say it works technologically very similar to an Uber or a Lyft or something like that, right? In terms of the fact that they use the same routing and this, that, and the other. The main difference is the type of vehicle that the service is going to be delivered in, and then also the amount of time that you can reasonably expect it to be picked up, right? So, this is something that if you call an Uber, it's going to pull into your driveway or pull up right in front of your apartment complex. Yes. With something like this, that may not be the case. If your apartment complex is, in here and there's a bunch of little dead end roads and that's the apartment complex, they may well require you to meet that at like the pipe stem or something like that, right? So it might require you to walk a little bit in that particular scenario, right? Or it might not, because it's using virtual bus stops. So it's going to use its cloud brain to figure out.
Bus stops.
Yeah, and so by that I mean like the points of aggregation where people would meet, right? So in its mind,
which are flexible.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So they are flexible.
It's the same way when you do call an Uber. Let's say you're in downtown Washington, you're just at some random location. Technically, that's a bus. When the car comes to pick you up, is like a bus stop, and that's how it would be with our vehicles. And we also believe that it's important for it to be an OmniRide branded service versus an Uber or a Lyft where you're just getting to someone's random car. This is a trained operator wearing an OmniRide shirt. It's the same bus operator that you see driving the buses. So we feel that it's best that it's us that's running it. We can control it and run it, and it has that recognition and safety feeling of getting into an OmniRide vehicle versus someone's random car.
Yeah. So that is a major difference. These will be in vehicles that we own using the same operators that we use to operate our regular buses. It's not some kind of, the inference being some kind of second-rate service or something like that. You would expect the same precise quality of delivery of service that you would get on our regular bus. Yes.
So sorry, just
no, of course.
A follow-up question.
That's what we're here for.
About you made an allusion, I think, that they're all handicap accessible. Is that true? Okay.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Yes,
they're all lift equipped. And if anybody does need assistance, there is that ability as well.
Yes,
thank you.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Joe Moore, Manassas Park City Council. So like Uber and Lyft, for using that example, would a person who orders OmniRide on their app, would they be able to track, by GPS that the bus is coming to them?
Yeah, that's one of the main benefits, right? So, if let's use an example of like, if it's day like the other day where it was snowing and 50-mile-an-hour winds, you might not particularly want to be loitering around outside, and this gives you the ability to not do that, right? So it's going to show you, it's like a much more, like involved version of like a kind of Where's My Bus app. So it's going to show, when it's coming to you, when the time comes, how much your fare would be. It's going to show you, if there's going to be other people on the vehicle with you, because it's not a bespoke taxi service, right? So each vehicle might be able to carry, 4 or 5 people, right? And depending on where the trip that you're taking is, there could be other people on that vehicle with you, or not, right? Depending on the service. So yes, you can track it. Yes, ma'am.
Tammy Beard from Yellow Cab.
Oh, hi Tammy. I think we have a call with you this afternoon.
Have you considered using our service like you do in Quantico?
Yeah. I guess I'll just cut across parents there. Sorry, but in my mind, at its core, if this is something that is becoming a facet of transit, this is like big policy stuff in my mind. This needs to be a service that we run, right? That the public is expecting us to run, right? PRTC.
Taxi service.
No, because it's not a taxi service. It would be, there's very much a place for the service that we have, that you provide for us in this instance with Quantico, but overall, this is something where we already have a fixed route, right? A fixed route of service that we provide with the full OmniRide rollout, this, that, and the other, and that's something that we would want to retain ownership of from soup to nuts. The software that we're proposing that we use is through a company called Rideco. If you go online and you look up, this type of software, Microtransit software, you'll probably get about 500 million hits on Google, because it seems like everyone and their brother has a version of this software. Everything from, who are some of the big players? Avago's a big player in it. Via's a huge player in it. So, for example, someone like Via, they offer more of what they would call a turnkey solution, right? You just give them a huge novelty check. They show up with the drivers. They show up with the vehicles. This, that, and the other. The SOPs, everything is how they run it. Now, it has the advantage of being instantaneously deliverable, but it doesn't necessarily offer you the ability to control the service as you would want. And so to loop back to your point, if we have control of the entire ecosystem, we are still using the OmniRide service to service people, and that's something that people have very much expressed to us. They don't want to feel as though they're going from having local transit service to having something that's not that. We haven't considered using Yellow Cab or any cab service for this type of thing yet.
But for paratransit,
Yes.
there is that linkage, and I think that's where that comes in on the paratransit side to assist, especially with ambulatory passengers, where it can help.
We do both.
Yeah, right, and that's where that factors in, I think that's where that blend comes in, is in that aspect, where the paratransit is a much wider area versus a microtransit that's a small zone, and that's how microtransit is functional. It's a small zone. Paratransit.
Even if I can do it cheaper. You're back to the money part of it.
Yeah, I don't know as necessarily that's a conversation for now, but maybe a conversation for this afternoon. We deal with what we've been charged to do at the time, and very much we were asked to deliver this service whilst fully keeping it within the OmniRide ecosystem. And I think that certainly organizational management believes that that's important, right, to retain that ownership, which would preclude us from using your service or any other cab service for that particular type of thing at this time. Yes, sir.
Lamar Boyd, Economic Development for the City of Manassas Park. So maybe just to compound upon the previous statement. So I am all for every resident of Manassas Park being able to get around the city in the method that they prefer. But I guess my concern is, with COVID, a lot of people have turned to driving Uber and Lyft as a way to supplement their income, as a way to maintain during this hard time. And I wonder, are we, going to be impacting some of our residents that do drive Ubers and Lyfts when we put something like this out?
I think that that's an excellent point. I don't know as it's something that I can necessarily speak to, because I haven't crunched the numbers on it myself. I would say that writ large, we are not aiming to compete with another mode of moving people around. We are aiming to service the people that currently ride the 68, right, because that will no longer be in existence, and to garner those additional folks, right? So I think that there's still a very clear dividing line between the service that this is and an Uber, Lyft, cab-like service, right? Those are truly bespoke a la carte options that take you precisely from point A to precisely to point B, and there is the expectation on behalf of the person that uses them that you're going to be waiting 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 4 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever, for that to pull up, assuming you're doing it not at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? And that's not the expectation with this service, right? It's from close points of aggregation to other points of aggregation. Your time is going to be much more in the 15-minute to 30-minute time frame. And also, the span of service that we have with this is not a 24/7, 365 service, parent, is it? So, I think our span of service was at least to match what currently exists, and maybe expand it a little bit, but it's certainly nothing even remotely approaching a 24/7, 365.
No, it's got to be it'll be an iterative process on that.
Exactly. Mary Rachel?
And I would address your comment by saying that the drivers that the PRTC has are trained, whereas the Uber drivers are not. And very often, particularly women who would need to go somewhere alone, they would not want to get into an Uber vehicle. They feel like they're getting into a vehicle with a stranger. Whereas the bus drivers, the microtransit drivers, they're vetted, they are trained, and there's a lot less worry.
Yeah,
And taxi drivers are too.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Right.
We are vetted. We are licensed by the police department. Background checks are run. Fingerprints are kept on file. They're trained.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So I think that you make an excellent point. But I really don't think that the perception of our service is versus, say, an Uber or something like that. I'll feel safe in this OmniRide service versus an Uber or something like that is going to lead to cannibalization of that ridership. I think that they're different, likely different demographics. Someone who wants the immediacy of whatever is the virtual equivalency of doing this now, right, is always going to be an Uber or Lyft customer, right? And we're not seeking to get into that realm. So I think it would be okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, good morning, everybody. Melissa Henderson. I am a business owner and also a resident of Manassas City and Manassas Park. So I actually came today because one of the things that I actually wanted to start with, take an initiative as a company, is I wanted to talk to somebody. Who do I talk to, either in the city or Manassas Park, in regards to the OmniRides and the type of bus shelters or lack of that we currently have. So that's why I saw this meeting and I said, let me come. So all this other stuff sounds great. It's all new to me. What I wanted to kind of bring back is the demographic, like we just said. Having ride shares like Uber or taxis require what I'm assuming is going to be more than the fee for this. I don't know yet what the fee would be for this. But just in that, the demographic that most concerns me, if we look back at this area, what do we have? We have a demographic that is going to be more Hispanic identifying, more people of non-speaking, non-native speaking.
Right.
So, which initially, again, that's what brought my attention to say, hey, we have inadequate bus shelters for these people. You and I, all of us here, without knowing anybody personally, I'm going to go ahead and safely assume that we all are blessed enough that we don't need to rely on public transportation in any mode, whether that be taxi, Uber, or OmniRide. When I first moved here to Manassas, a million years ago when I was 18, 19 years old, I utilized this service. That's how I got to college. That's how I got, that's how I navigated the city, besides walking and the wonderful taxi service. I ended up having like a routine, driver, so that was great. So moving back to what this is and the purpose of this, my 3 questions is, number 1, how do we market or educate that Hispanic identifying and non-native people who would most be utilizing this? Because the fact of the matter is, Monday through Friday, while all of us are either commuting to work at 5, 6 a.m. or my lovely commute of only 6 minutes into Manassas Park, right? Other people in the community are home, they need to go shopping, they need to go do laundry, they need to get to just do their basic things. And when we talk about like low ridership in this area, well, I think this microtransit may be the answer to that. If you're making more routes available, more stops available, but my only concern would be, how do we get this information to the homes? Like for me, myself, I actually went back and I was looking at like older newsletters that were sent out by Manassas Park. And I think it was like a January one, so I'm super late to the game, that said that you guys, or that Manassas Park was now offering free transit rides to students, which if you guys know, like in major cities like DC, they already do that. Right. So when I saw that, I was like, now coming from me, I'm not super young, I'm 39 years old, but still kind of like being in that demographic, like I know in the type of business that I am in, I have to work to make sure everything is virtual, right? And we have an app, and we've got, because it's like the most like demographic, like homeowners is between like age of like 31 to 35. And those are the type of people, they don't want me lugging around, pen and paper. They don't want me, showing them physical samples of things. They want to see 3D models, right? What is my house going to look like, Melissa, after you're done with this? So it's like, that's why I'm saying I think this is great, but if we're really going to market this to the demographic of people that really are going to be utilizing this. So I understand maybe like, with older generations, the handicapped people, okay, that's all great. but what about the other, that larger part? So that was my first question.
Okay.
My second question was just in regards to the fee, and then encouraging. You guys are talking about, the reason why we kind of have to look at microtransit is because the ridership is so low traditionally. But guys, I'm a mother of 2 teenagers, 14 and 17 years old, and they always, Mom, they want to ride the bus, so they know how. I've showed them how, but the stops are limited. So as kids, not talking, 11, 12, 13 years old, because those are too young, they probably would not be allowed to, take public transportation on their own. But, as you start getting older, kids that start working at 15, 16, 17 years old, they need to get around and move around the city. They may not be able to afford a taxi cab. They may not be able to afford an Uber. With an Uber, you've got to have that link to, a bank account, have a credit card on file. So these younger people who are very much valid, right? I mean, they may not be, business or homeowners right now, but what we want to do is show them that Manassas and Manassas Park is a place to stay. Guys, encourage how can they utilize the services in the areas that are here. Public transportation, I do not believe should go away. I don't think that no matter what other type of rideshare, that we have, that we should eliminate that, because again, there's always going to be a different demographic, and sometimes it's a demographic that is not well represented. So while everyone else, is kind of much bigger, and we all have much more money to say, well, we can take an Uber, we can, take a taxi. But what about for the other large part of the community that really does still need services like this? So those are my three questions.
Okay, so I will do my level best to remember the first one. But
how do we get this out to the Hispanic community?
I will start the whole thing by saying that we can always do better, right? But I will say for the outreach that we've done to promote this service, everything that we have done, be it riding on the buses, there's an English-speaking person and there's a native Spanish speaker on the buses. When we're handing out the surveys on the buses, they are both in English and Spanish. Our online survey is also in English and Spanish. Okay. We have promoted this session. All of our other sessions are on our website in both languages. They are also, in El Tiempo Latino, and we put them in the free lot. So we do multilingual stuff just by virtue of the fact that that's what we do. Okay. We have also worked quite recently with, do you know the Georgetown South?
Yes.
Okay, so we've worked quite closely with Meg at Georgetown South to actually get the information out to their folks there. They have a very high Hispanic population, and this is kind of, obviously it vexes you as well, and it does us as well, is that the Latino population as a whole is statistically very large in this area, and a very small segment of the people that ride our buses, right? And what we have found through doing this outreach and others is, one, that community itself tends to have a lot of people that provide ad hoc trips themselves, right? A lot of ad hoc carpooling and taxi trips that are outside of the regular public transit system. But then also, on top of that, it's a lack of understanding about our buses. And, for example now, so our local buses are free, and this speaks to some of your other comments, right? Is that the fare for this bus, for Microtransit, would be the same as a local bus fare, right? Which is to say that if we were doing it right now, it would be nothing, because our local bus fare is currently nothing. And it has been that way pretty much since the start of the pandemic, purely and simply we wanted to cut down on cash transactions, put our operators at less risk, so on and so forth. There's also a much larger kind of existential reason to do it, which is that you spend a lot of money on the local side, fare boxes, people counting the money. You spend dollars to collect cents, right? And so, is it right to be charging some of the people that need it the most proportionally a larger part of their income than maybe we charge some of our commuter people? So you can get into that as well. Now, right now, our local bus service is free through June 30th of this year, that being the end of fiscal year 2022. It is in our proposed budget to continue for FY23, right? That is just what I said, though. That is a proposed budget, and that can change, right? So we've seen what we think is the need for that to continue on the local side, and if that was the case, it would also be free. Right, but I think if not, then it would be what the local fare is. So what, like a couple bucks?
$155 right now.
There you go. So it wouldn't just mirror the local fare cost because we think that's equitable. I think that's actually a requirement, right? I mean, like we would be replacing a local service, so you can't just, not because of bad optics, but also because of the law, you can't just replace it and then charge people more to access the same stuff, right? So the idea is that, you know, over time for us, I mean, we're a transit agency. We're not charged with making money, but we certainly are charged with losing as little of it as humanly possible, right? And so I'm gonna use this phrase from our chief executive, who might show up at some point. It is all about cheeks in seats, right? And so the more people that we get onto our buses, even if they're paying $1.50, $2, whatever it is, $8, $9, $10 on the commuter buses, you know, that's money that we don't have to find elsewhere, and it makes these services that much more justifiable, right? So certainly we're always looking to do better with our Hispanic community outreach. We've had our outreach people. They go on. There's this. I think it has a relatively large following on a Facebook local radio show called Tu Comunidad. You have to forgive my mangling of pronunciation. And to promote this, you know, we have actually a relatively good relationship with Todos Markets. You know, and they put our information up. So we do what we can. Could it be better? Always. But we have made sure that every avenue to promote these changes to the service that is communicated in English is communicated in Spanish as well.
I'm sorry, if I could just weigh in. When you asked about the shelters in the city,
shelters.
That nature. One of my first meetings with this team and with Bob Schneider, who's the executive, that was one of my first things, was in regards to how we're going to address it. Okay. And then we actually, you know, got into the discussion of the ridership and, you know, exactly, because again, we want to make certain that, you know, if we're going to keep this system, you know, then we know, yes, we can go ahead and work on, you know, shelters along that particular route. But if we are going to transition to something, then we may not want to put that money into replacing those shelters yet. Kind of definitely wanted to identify the need. So that's why we wanted to definitely have this opportunity to let them present this before we decided here's how we want to try to address these shelters.
Okay.
See, and the interesting thing there is also because of how the service is, and you feel to cut me off whenever you want, Perry, but our bus stops exist in basically two forms right now, or maybe multiple forms. Like you have just some of them, you have just the big pole with bus stop written on it, which I loathe, and then you have the ones with more of a lollipop sign that actually have like actual information about the stop as opposed to just bus stop, and then you might have a full-on shelter, right? So we will likely be keeping all of those in this service footprint, right? And if there's one that has a good shelter at it, that might become a really good point of aggregation, because you know if you've got 2 or 3 people standing there waiting those 10 minutes for the van to show up, they're not going to be doing it standing in the rain because there's a shelter there. So we have the ability to tinker around with the software once it's up and running. If there are specific points where we want, well, that's a really good shelter, we want to make sure we continue to use that shelter, that we will do that. So I don't think that if we do this, there's an uncoupling from supporting the existing bus infrastructure that's there. Not at all, in my mind. In fact, it would still potentially lead to, you know, having more of those things over time and wanting to improve the facilities that we do have at those, because we're still going to have people waiting in those spots, hopefully for less time, and, you know, but more of them for less time. So we still want to be able to provide those amenities, right? And as I said right from the top, there's always the possibility that if people just come out of the woodwork and, you know, this is something that's beyond what Microtransit can really do, then we would probably look to move it back to a fixed route over time. And so especially you're not going to want to be ripping out infrastructure if that's a possibility, right?
And I think that that's something that could totally be possible, guys, because, I mean, we don't see the massive influx of new people that move to Manassas and Manassas Park consistently. Everyone's coming here for, you know, technology jobs. Every time, you know, Micron expands, we get, you know, thousands of new people. So, you know, if I try to keep kind of like my, you know, like my ear to the ground. So it's like, you know, when you're on like those Facebook groups and you're seeing, you know, all these new people, and a lot of them are coming from larger, you know, metro cities. And then they come here, and then it's like, hey, where is the public transportation? You know, hey, you know, where is this? And so they're sort of looking for all those same sorts of conveniences, you know, that they're used to. And, you know, okay, so that's my thing. It's great that we're doing that. We're also doing so much new construction here. Well, if we're doing all this new construction and we're bringing people, if we can make, you know, public transportation really something that can be utilized, meaning I can get really to, you know, to places that I want to go, you know, like if I can get to places that I want to go. You know, so that's what I'm saying. I think that it's not something to just abandon, right? Definitely, I think, you know, just if it's kind of done the right way, kind of, you know, with those different sorts of demographics in mind, that, you know, that's definitely something that could still flourish. One suggestion, when you said, you know, we're doing all these things, that we could do something better, maybe could somebody discuss maybe possibly like doing some like direct outreach to like the local schools, like even if it was like high schools, if that's kind of, you know, like the age. Because, like, for me, I am very vocal with my children. We kind of, you know, all support each other. We, you know, kind of always know what is going on. And so I share things with them because it's very important for them to also be aware of what is going on in their communities, right? But maybe not all parents are that way. Maybe not, you know, everyone has the time or even maybe thinks that, you know, if there's free buses, maybe I should tell, you know, my high schooler and kind of encourage them, right? So maybe we could do that. My only other question was just going to be time-wise. So way back when I was, you know, using the service, it took me a good minute just to get from, you know, here to the other side of Manassas. So with this microtransit, obviously we're going to be having, you know, multiple people, and I know you said it's not going to be picked up door to door, nor is it going to be delivered door to door. It's going to be some areas, but kind of if it's a smaller van, like, do you guys? I think is that a valid question? It's like, are we still looking at the same amount of transit time?
I think it's a perfectly valid question.
Okay.
I think it's somewhat more difficult to answer because, of course, with a bus, I can just bust out the Route 68 schedule. There you go, boom, right? But the software in this is designed so that, you know, it's not going to, if it just picked you up, it's not going to go around and pick up 17 other people, and then you're like, oh my God, this is like horrendous, and you're stuck on it for an hour or something like that. They're going to have, you know, because if you're getting, I think that would be the worst case scenario. Because if you get on a bus and you know it's a 90-minute headway, right? Well, then you're on the bus, this, that, and the other. But if you're being picked up and you have the expectation that you're going to be relatively expediently dropped off to your place, if you then find out that it's actually only about 2% better than the fixed route bus that you were going to get, well, then you're probably going to be even more disappointed. Okay. So I can't give you like exact time frame expectations because, of course, a lot of that is dependent exactly on how many vehicles you shove out there, right? Because so we look at the passenger load, right? And okay, is it 10 passengers per hour on the Route 68, and that was an if, not an it is, because I don't know. But if it is that, right, then we're going to need 2 15-passenger vans out there. Okay, fine, right? But then suddenly, if the passenger load is 20 now, and we've still got 2 vans out there, well, then the amount of time it's going to take you to get a ride, and the amount of time it's going to take you to get to where you're going once you've got on the van is going to take longer. So we need to be scalable. So we have in our FY23 budget both money to actually acquire vans and then also a plan to lease additional vans, because has anyone in this room bought a car in the last 2 years? It sucked, didn't it? Right? So that is exactly what we have experienced as well. So we're used to spending a year waiting for a $750,000 bus. We're not used to spending a year to buy a $40,000 transit van, and that's what you currently do. So this is a new service mode for us. We would have to acquire vehicles. We have plans to do that. But if ridership exceeds the vehicles that we would have immediately deliverable on day one, we have the ability to lease those through. I mean, for what it's worth, it would be enterprise, right? With big shock to everyone rents through. So that's what we would do in order to be able to provide that service, to ensure those wait times. Mr. Hoy.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
So, well, no, I have 2 concerns. So my first concern is, number one, currently, you know, the model is that at a particular bus stop, things are ADA compliant, sidewalks, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. My concern is that you may have someone that may be, you know, physically restrained to not be able to go to an area, or the area that you're asking them to meet you at may not be designed to be handy accessible. Mm-hmm. I'm also imagining we have a senior living facility down the street that sits up on the hill, And I can only imagine if they are calling to try to get someone to give them a ride, and you're asking them to walk down this hill. For my residents, I feel very, very concerned about that.
Yeah, I think that that's a valid concern. I will say that paratransit would still exist as a separate thing to this, right? So if someone is really, really, truly non-ambulatory, right, then that service would exist for them. I would strongly encourage, I think the only way that we could work this out is that ultimately the customer service agents, the people who are administering the system in real time, you can drag and drop a pickup to go wherever, right? But if you're going through the app, you don't really have the ability to set vagaries like, oh, well, I'm kind of at the top of a hill here, and I can't get down to the bottom, so if you put this at the bottom, it might as well be Africa because I can't get there. So that's why we retain the customer service component where you can still pick up the phone, right? For those folks, my guess is, this is probably not the case for all of them, but for those folks who need that kind of accommodation on transit, they're probably already calling our customer service technicians. They're just doing it a day in advance to schedule a deviation or a paratransit trip or something like that, right? So that would still retain the flexibility where if you physically cannot make it to that point of aggregation for whatever reason, or let's say you get there and someone's parked 3 Humvees in front of the point and you physically couldn't get off the curb to get on the bus if you wanted to, there will be that flexibility in there. I think a lot of those kinks, we'll do our very, very best to kind of iron those out before it goes on the road, but I think some of those things we have to be prepared to figure out a little bit on the fly with the best will in the world that we will. And also, Rideco, this is not their first implementation, right? They have implementations, easy for me to say, all over the country. Most immediately would be Loudoun County, right? So they do have, Loudoun's been using this for some time. They're very happy with it. It's worked very well. They probably have some of the same concerns as we do and some different ones. We have spoken extensively to them, been out there and toured their facility and seen everything as well. So I think that I would trust in the system's ability to be able to work around it whilst fully recognizing that those are valid concerns and that I can see how we would need to work around those problems. But as I understand it, no stop once it is put there is like, the sword in the stone, right? It can be moved. It can be moved on a per trip basis, but I can definitely see how it's one of those things that would need to be done by speaking to a live body, which fortunately the service will retain. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry I forgot to introduce myself last time. Melanie Hughes. I'm an orientation and mobility specialist with the Virginia Department for the Blind and Vision Impaired. And that usually comes with an explanation because most people don't know what an orientation and mobility specialist is or does. And my job is to teach people who have vision impairments from total blindness to low vision how to get around their communities. So I've been working in Prince William County for 25 years now.
Your name is familiar to me. You're a big advocate for folks over at the Manassas Mall, right?
What's up?
Yeah, over at the Manassas Mall, you're a big advocate for folks over there?
Yes, the Manassas Mall. Thank you for mentioning that.
We have some updates for you either after this or during this.
Awesome. I would love to hear about that. Yeah, I think
it's nice to meet you, though. I've only heard your name, so it's good to speak to you.
I'm so flattered.
Yeah, and in a good way. In a good way, to be clear. So carry on.
Thank you. So and it's been a pleasure working with PRTC on Ride over those years because of these types of things. You're just listening and responsive. I just wanted to bring up some of the things that are particular to people with disabilities. And the people that I work with don't only necessarily have vision impairments, they can also have concurrent disabilities like wheelchairs and hearing impairments, and so I just want you to know I'm coming from other perspectives as well. Sure. First of all, some of the points that have been made have been great, such as the need from having to walk from the house to the point, to a different point. And that seems like not a big deal to have like a 1/10 of a mile or whatever, and and serious mobility issues notwithstanding. It depends on what's between those 2 points. Is there like Route 28 between those 2 points? Will somebody have to cross some major intersection that may be dangerous or something that's beyond their capabilities? First, I don't want to make the impression that somebody with a vision impairment can't cross 28 because many people certainly can and do. But it really depends on the individual and their level of physical and other capabilities. So knowing, if there's the advantage of a bus stop is that it's a known point. Like that person can become familiar with that point and know how to get there, and once they're there, know how to get back. And somebody might say, oh, hey, this is great, I can drop you off closer to your house. Well, if they don't know where they are, it's not that great of a benefit. But I want to make it clear that I'm speaking vastly in favor of this service, this on-demand service. This is going to be a huge upgrade for people with disabilities. It's going to vastly increase the ability for them to use your service because of the fact that the line, they don't have to get to the line anymore,
Right. But to your point, I think if we keep the existing bus stops, and you mentioned there's an element of familiarity, right? If we keep the existing points, then it should hopefully become just a net add, right? Like you can still go to that bus stop, right? You know what I mean? And you can still get it at that bus stop. That is that fixed point if you wanted to.
If somebody wants to,
yes.
Yeah, but being picked up in front of their house
right.
Is definitely, I mean, people are, that's huge because you get to be in shelter or whatever until the person arrives. And the fact that you're keeping the phone based also is great. Not everybody is capable of using apps or has the finances to have apps and so forth. So I love the flexibility.
And again, I will just say also that the customer service agents that you speak to, they're here. They work for us. They're in Prince William County.
So is it going to be Bowles Ford, or is it still going to be the transit center?
Well, so the vehicles will be dispatched out of the new facility, but our customer service agents remain where they were, which was in Woodbridge. Okay. But it's still the same. It's still the same people, right? You're not. It's not like it's a customer service line that's associated with Rideco, and they're not OmniRide people at all. They know the routes. They know more about the bloody routes than any of us do. So they're the people that they would be speaking to.
So if a caller said, let's say the customer service rep says, I'd like to get you picked up at this intersection, and the person says, well, I don't know that intersection. What about this intersection? Do they have that kind of flexibility where they could suggest a different?
I think so.
I believe that's the great thing, that it can move, and there may be certain circumstances where they probably could be picked up closer to their door too.
I think there's probably going to be, generally speaking, people who are going to be availing themselves of this service are not using it on a one-time basis, right? So I can see, number one, most of the customer service agents know people who need something a bit different, right? For whatever reason, they know them all by name anyway, right? But certainly with Rideco, if you're using it, you're going to have some kind of individual identifier, and I can see that if you're someone who has, a visual impairment, a hearing impairment, anything like that, that's going to be associated with your account. And so when you would book the trip, it's just going to do it from where you're standing right now, right? Or the point that you dictate to the other point, right? So if you're using the app, you don't have to tell anyone because it knows where you are. But if you're calling in, you're going to have to tell, right? So I suspect that that's something that will be a feature that would exist in the system. But certainly at the very least, there is the ability to move things around in a dynamic fashion. That is the entire reason why we retain the customer service element of things.
And I do think if there are specific questions, please send them to us so we can work with the company as well and make sure that it's set up to meet the needs properly, and that we don't find ourselves in a situation that's not acceptable or dangerous or not convenient.
Absolutely.
So I've worked with public transit systems across Northern Virginia, from Winchester to DC, for all these years. I've never heard of anything like this before. I think this is phenomenal. And
well, I'm glad you like the idea.
Just to see how it works out, is it still pending approval? Or?
Yes, 100%. So it will go before our board at the June board meeting, which will be the first Thursday in June. I don't know what the date of that is, but it will be the first Thursday in June. And
my guess is it will pass.
Okay, that's good to hear.
I mean, certainly that's our expectation. When we brought it, just to be completely transparent, about 6 months ago, we actually brought it back before the board, to garner their approval at that time, when we had done somewhat less outreach than we had done now, but still some. And some of the outreach that we had done had raised flags from some people who had issues, and they wanted us to do a more thorough deep dive into it and then bring it back to them. And so that's where we stand here. So, but I think at the time the general consensus was everything from this is just a flat out and out good idea, I'm all about it, to it's worth throwing it at the wall and seeing if it sticks, right? Simply because, you know, the route has been in existence for X amount of time. The ridership is what it is. We have done the outreach that we can over time to improve it. Could it have been better? Yes, it could always be better, but it nonetheless happened, and so it's worth trying this other thing.
Yeah. And the other thing too, I do want to speak. I'm sorry, let's speak to Tammy real quick with the start of the cap. There's a big space for transportation in the county. I think there's a lot of opportunities for partnerships, whether it's maybe not necessarily for this exactly, but for a lot of the things that we do, and we are looking at doing. So I don't want this to be looked at as trying to push you out of the picture, because there's a lot of opportunities where your flexibility comes in real handy and really helps add value to what OmniRide does. So I think there's
I think that we work well together.
Yeah, we do. And I think
this does feel like taxi service to me,
though. But there's different aspects of it, and there's a lot of other things where the taxi service can complement us very well, as we are looking at restructuring our eastern services, as we're looking at growing all over. So look for us to be discussing those with you.
I mean, I think also, you know, I mean, just to be completely transparent, there's no doubt that, you know, as time has gone by in the United States, and, you know, ridership on some modes of types of transit and certain routes has been fantastic, and on other routes it continues to languish. They've, writ large, transportation people have looked at it and gone, oh, well, you know, cab companies, they kind of, you know, that's an interesting little flexible type model they have there, and, you know, maybe we can take some parts of that to make our service a bit more dynamic, right? And so, and just, I think to say otherwise than that would just be complete rubbish, to be honest with you, because it's clear that that's what folks have done. But the stated goals of a transit agency are going to be very different than the stated goals of, you know, a private cab company or something like that.
Absolutely, because you guys get government subsidies and I get nothing.
Well, yeah, well, exactly.
And I'm for profit.
Right, exactly.
And you guys want to make a profit.
Well,
but yours is probably
that would be incredible. I mean, I'm pretty certain that there's absolutely no transit company in the entire United States that does that.
But like I said, you guys get all kinds of subsidies, and I get nothing.
Yes.
So it's very important to me to keep the relationship.
Absolutely.
With you to build my business.
Right. Well, and so so as we've moved forwards, right? So with the relationship that we have now, right? We have a relationship now that we haven't had in the past, right?
Well, we've had it for quite a while, but
right.
It's expanding.
It's expanding.
Right.
Yes,
exactly.
That's a great
and there was a point in the history of OmniRide or PRTC where we didn't have one at all, right? So these things have grown over time, right? So I think as we, in my mind, as we grow and shift into doing other things, the pie gets bigger. We're not taking other people's pieces of pie, right? So we want to continue our relationship, expand our relationship where it makes sense to do so, whilst at the same time doing other things. We want to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So that's our goal. But I don't think that it's anything for you to be concerned about. But I mean, I get that that's me saying that.
It sounds very much like taxi service.
I hear you.
I do want to talk about the drop-offs, or ask about the drop-offs.
Sure.
So is it like you're going to pick me up at 123 ABC Street in Manassas Park and take me to 123 ABC Street in Manassas City?
No.
Or you're going to take me to a bus stop close to both addresses, or pick me up and take me to?
It would be in the defined zone. For example, on the screen here, whatever is in that green zone.
And I didn't know an exact street in there.
Yeah.
So I was just.
So if it's in there, then yes, it will take you from that point to where we picked you up, or the nearest corner to the drop off, as long as it's in that zone.
And if it's not in that zone, you will pick me up in that zone and take me to a line?
Yes.
That's correct. It would take you to, more than likely, it would take you to the hub, right? Which currently is by the Social Security building and by the court. And it would take you there so that you can then connect with our other fixed route services. So yes,
and that's where the cab is different than that. So if you wanted to go from Manassas Park to Gainesville, we can't do that with that. You would still need a taxi cab to do that, or taxi cab from the point that we could take you to. Like maybe it's a connect, maybe it's both things, maybe it's us and a taxi cab.
We do your trips in Quantico, as you guys well know. And in 2021, a total of 2,700 trips. Net trips were 24, which means not counting cancellations and no-shows. And we did a little over 2,400 trips for what you're going to pay for one van.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, bear in mind, number one, that's just certainly a point. Yes, you've made a point there. The other thing is, the economics of it are slightly different at this point because we are, well, not necessarily that, because in fact, actually, because it's not. Like, we are currently sinking, everyone in this room is currently sinking a lot of money into running the Manassas Park 68 as it currently stands, right? So we're not looking to necessarily to save money on that, but to, for the same precise dollar value, be able to offer a much better service. So I think that if it was coming from scratch, then it's potentially something where that point would have even more gravitas, right? And again, maybe this is a question for this afternoon, but you get more into the question just of, okay, so how much are transit agencies, and how much are they cab companies? Because there are certainly folks that think that we shouldn't have a relationship with you guys.
I know.
Right? Like, at all, of any kind, because that's like, oh, that's too cabby. But this is not cabby. But then from your perspective, this looks pretty cabby, right? But from us, it doesn't. So I fully hear what you're saying, but I'm more interested in anything that we can do as an agency that gets the people that hold the purse strings to be happier with us, right? And moves more people, right, in a better way. And I think that by anyone's yardstick, even the folks who ride the 68 8 times a day, and we met several of them, right, they would say that the service, there are things that they don't like about the service, right? So by anybody's yardstick, it doesn't seem to be working, and this is at least worth trying. But I do hear you.
No, and our motto kind of in our office is the same as you said the director's motto is. The more butts you get in that seat, the more money you make, and
yeah, that's
the faster
great.
you go.
I'm going to get a t-shirt of that. Go ahead.
I think you had a question?
Oh, yes, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you, sir.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So my name's Leandro Gonzalez. I'm a resident here in Manassas Park, disabled, low vision. Melanie, who was my trainer, is with the state, just fantastic. I hold her in the highest regard, and good person too. And so I'm just first of all like to voice my complete support for this program. It's extremely it's beyond welcoming to hear, because currently with the bus lines the way they are, my particular situation, I have very limited mobility, but also if the hours between the hours that I do work and other hours that I might need to get around within the city of Manassas Park, and the time, and the bus schedules and the time, there hasn't really been much opportunity for me to utilize that program that you had in place before, and this would increase the flexibility significantly, even in order to be able to be a patron of other establishments and stuff within the park. Certainly go into the community center, Old Town, that kind of or which is close by, but that kind of thing. So in that particular regard, I have a couple questions, which is super basic. One that you covered, but I'd like to just ensure that I was clear on what you said. So as far as service request response time, you mentioned somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes. Is that accurate?
I believe that's the stated company goal.
Right.
Right? I mean, to be clear, you could make it 2 minutes. It'd just need 100 vans, right? And be like the least efficient thing ever. But generally, when they look at the service and they're like, this is how many vehicles we recommend you have, it's predicated off that 15 to 30 minutes after you order it. It should be there.
Well, that makes perfect sense. I wouldn't expect anything to be like, we're talking about the Ubers and Lyfts and stuff, where sometimes they can be there in a few minutes. Sometimes we wait 15 minutes for them as well. So the other is about the hours of operation, and I recall that you were talking about it would at least mirror what's in place now. And what's in place now is Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 7:30, and that for someone such as myself that that does, let's say, you work until 5 o'clock, that there is a limited window there, and also I wouldn't be able to utilize anything on continually if I go on a Saturday. And you mentioned that to start off with, it would probably just mirror that. But what are the chances of something like this program expanding to say 8:30 or 9 p.m. or opening for a certain time frame also on a Saturday?
I mean, my response to that would be very good. All it takes is money, right? We are charged with rolling this service out in a revenue neutral way, and in order, yes, you're getting those better service frequencies and this, that, and the other, but it doesn't allow us to run it outside of the span of service that we currently have, because that would cost more, right? So certainly you could do that, but it would cost more money. Marichal.
Yeah, actually, this will dovetail with what you just asked, and I wanted to address what the lady said on the back row about people moving to the area not having the same level of service that they're accustomed to in the old area. It all boils down to funding. And in my personal opinion, the Commonwealth of Virginia has underfunded transportation for decades. It's underfunded other things too, like mental health and education and a number of items. But transportation has suffered. And the localities, because they have pushed responsibilities down from the state to the localities in the form of unfunded mandates, the locality has less resources to deal with. And it affects the extension of service as well.
Let's go that one.
So my first question is, so through the app, the phone, or the web, when someone calls to make a reservation, number one, are they able to request an operator that would speak the same language as them? Because I assume that if we have a Hispanic user that's possibly...
Yeah, so I'd have to punt that to Perrin, because we have a system.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Well, we have multiple things. We do have bilingual staff that do speak Spanish and English, but we also have a language line. So if you are of a language that isn't someone that can speak it fluently, it'll connect you, and we have a translation service that works with us. So no matter what language you are, we have that ability to communicate.
So your app or your web would not be in Spanish?
So the app and the web will be, purely and simply because certainly with the web interface, it's built into whether you're using Chrome or Internet, it's going to translate it anyway. And I believe that the app is English-Spanish as well. I haven't actually seen the app at all, so I couldn't say that that's ironclad. The other two very much are. But I believe the actual language that an app or something like that appears in on your phone is very much based on your language settings in the phone, right? So it's done locally, right? So if you are a, Spanish or whatever, Korean, whatever it is, and that's what you have your phone set up, that's what it appears as. It's my understanding.
Okay. With that, but again, the question of them being able to request someone that would speak that same language that they do.
Yes, that is, yes, and it would be identical to what we currently offer, which is extremely robust.
Yeah, we have that through our language line. So if you call in the customer service and you request a certain language, they'll connect that to you.
No, but what I'm asking is, are they able to request an operator, a driver?
Sorry. Yeah, totally. We were talking past you at that point. I think the short answer to that is going to be probably not. If I can envisage a scenario whereby if we have multiple operators out there and one of them, we do not have a bilingual language requirement for any of our operators. Certainly some of them speak Spanish, French, German, whatever, by virtue of being the awesome people that they are. But I can see how maybe there would be a scenario where if there's multiple available and you're a Spanish language speaker, they might be able to book you onto one, but the service is not set up to be flexible on the language of the operator at the time, which is the same exact thing for also the bus system as well.
Well, that's the reason why I asked, because if we're able to tweak and, make this something, then I would really like to make it something that really would work, for everyone in the community as best as possible. And then my other question is, when you're mentioning the vans, are the vans wheelchair accessible, and or would someone be able to request that either through the app, the web, or with the person?
They're 100% accessible. That we're mandated to run 100% accessible vehicles. Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Talking about vehicles, are there racks on the vehicles where they could put a person could put their bicycle on the?
I believe there's some weirdness with like certain. I remember reading something from you the other day about like types of racks on the front of transit vans and blah blah blah.
We're working on a solution for that. The van right now, we're concerned about the bicycle impairing the view, but there is another mechanism, and we're working on it with our maintenance department to possibly have it be mounted to the rear of the vehicle. But we are looking at making sure that is room for bicycles on there.
Yeah, on those vehicles, it's not so, the mounting points aren't as spectacularly well put on there as they are on city buses, but certainly that's something that we're intending to be the case.
Yeah.
The other question I had was, Joe, you mentioned that you are going to be purchasing new minivans for this service in the next fiscal year. I'm hoping you're thinking about purchasing electric vehicals.
Oh, that's an excellent question. Let me hand it over to the director of the regional study on zero emissions buses. Take it away, Perrin.
Well, right now we are in the middle of a zero emissions bus study, zero or low emissions bus study. It just started in November, and we're analyzing the various types of technologies that are out there. You have battery electric, you have the compressed natural gas that's already been out there. Hydrogen fuel cell is another new technology that's coming down the line. There's renewable natural gas. So we're looking at all of these things. And once the study is done in the spring, the study is not going to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's going to lay it all out for us. And that way we can have a conversation with our commission about what is our path forward. Right now on the transit bus side, I'll be honest with you, and I'm on the tape here, battery electric still has a long ways to go with transit. There's a lot of range issues with it, but it doesn't mean that it's not viable, and it doesn't mean that we might still try it out. Particularly the footprint that we operate on the western side of Manassas Park lend ourselves perfectly for that trial. If we're going to try it anywhere, try it in a nice confined space where even if there are those limitations, it wouldn't impact the service. But right now there's transit systems that need 2 electric buses for every diesel bus that they operate, and that's not viable in the long term. If you have a really large fleet like Metro with thousands of buses, you're not going to be able to double your fleet size and still be able to run service. You have to cut service. So as we look at how we can better function with electric vehicles, that's why this is a good pilot to see, because we can right-size the service. We could get cars in the future even if we wanted to. Maybe it's not just vans, and maybe it is electric cars. So yes, there's room in this space as we go into it, looking at something other than fossil fuel vehicles. So electric does fit in somewhere down the line. It's just what capacity is that?
I think there's like, and I guess I'm on tape too, but I'll say it anyhow. I think that there's a 0% chance that the vehicles that we would procure in FY23, assuming that the stars align and you can actually find one, would be electric, right? The vehicles that we buy off the state contract through a state provider, that being Sunny Merriman, right? There are 0 vehicles that are currently available that would be electric, right? That we would be looking at. So it wouldn't be a question of sucking it up and buying the more expensive one and it pays you back because gas is like unicorn tears at the current time. It wouldn't be a case of making that choice because you wouldn't be able to make that choice. Your choice would be a gas Ford Transit type vehicle or a diesel transit type vehicle, right? So that's the only choice that we would have at this point in time. If down the line, there is the ability, as Perrin mentions, to move over to, if you wanted to have a minivan, fine, there are electric minivans now. That would actually be something that you could theoretically buy. And I know that Ford is working on an electric transit, but it's not available for us to order at the current time. So it's certainly something that we're on board with, no pun intended. Perrin is at the absolute cutting edge for that in this area. I mean, he does share the What's that committee called?
It's the Washington Metropolitan Bus Leaders Committee.
There you go. And they're looking at this from a more holistic bus sense. So certainly we are looking at doing that. That's something that we're very much interested in doing. But right now, where they are available, where the options are available, they seem to be hundreds of thousands of dollars more expensive on the front end, right? And the span of service that they can operate is not long enough to where you can use one for one. You have to have two of them. So they get to be $200,000 more, and you need two of them, versus just a regular diesel bus at this current time. And on the other side of things, with like the smaller vehicles, they're just not available yet for that type of service. I mean, yeah, you could go out and buy a Tesla or something like that, I suppose, but that's not going to work for this kind of service. So our options immediately going into having the program out there are not electric, is what I'm saying. But certainly it's something that we would consider going forward.
It seems the transition is always the most difficult part of any operation.
Yes, because you need the infrastructure to be able to start it.
Yeah.
So you want to start small for that purpose. Before you go ahead and invest millions of dollars into it, make sure it works with a few before you do more.
Yeah, I mean, just as like a sidebar, so like our service right now is generally divided into two halves. We have our local bus and our commuter bus, right? So on the commuter bus side, by and large, that's just a fundamental non-starter, right? Electric vehicles, they do best when they're regenerating energy back in its very low speed and this, that, and the other, as opposed to how aerodynamic do you think our buses are? It's like pushing a house through the air, right? So if you're on 95 doing 60 miles an hour or whatever, that is like electric vehicle kryptonite, right? Like that's killing the range. But on the local service, there are certainly routes where they potentially would work. The East-West Express, for example, or our Metro Directs, again, terrible, right? Because they drive at 50 miles an hour over a long distance. You're not constantly putting energy back into it. But on some of the smaller local routes, they would maybe make an argument for it. But we have to make sure that, you know, we've got the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure at our locations to be able to support that. Yes, we have one that's pretty much brand new at this point, and that would be a good one to start with. Our Woodbridge facility is 35 years old. So, you know, I mean, that's an issue. Go ahead.
And we're seeing this proposed coverage zone for our particular area. So I'm looking to the question of Tammy said earlier. So I would like to know how close is the next proposed coverage zone that's adjacent to this? Because again, if someone were, and again, if they're traveling inside the zone, that's great. Well, say for example, though, the bus is taking too long, you know, they've exhausted other options, and now they're just I'm gonna just take this from point A to point here, and then I can cross over or walk or do whatever. But essentially, how far is the closest adjacent proposed coverage zone?
Yeah, I would say not very close, because there isn't one, right? So, we have this idea, which if we weren't doing the longer outreach, would basically be just starting to happen kind of like right now-ish, right? When this, if it gets approved, if it goes live in December, it will be our first of these and our only of these, right? And the other ones that are even in conceptual talks are not on this side of the county, right? They're over in like the Quantico area, right? So there are no other proposed zones around here. This is the test case. Well, this is it.
Yeah, and there's two applications for this. It's in a case like this is to supplement or take advantage of a route that's not doing well. But there's opportunities in areas where we have no transit whatsoever, and that's the other test case to try it. And that's why it's kind of a blank slate. Just we could draw lines on there all day of where that could work. So this is to take advantage of a low-performing route, but there's certainly lots of opportunities for areas that have no transit at all, and that could be used as a precursor. If that does well in an area like that, then you could justify putting fixed routes. So that's where the other side of that is.
And I don't think it's speaking out of turn to say that we certainly have commissioners who are watching this very closely, who are extremely interested to see how it does, what the public responds to, if it truly ends up being revenue neutral, if it actually moves more people, all of these big fat questions that we don't have, any answers to. And I think that if it was successful, certainly there are areas where it could potentially be rolled out in areas where we don't have service, either as a gateway drug to, fixed route transit, or as if it doesn't end up blowing up, then just keeping it as what it is. But those things, all of those solutions would be very much not revenue neutral, right? And whereas this is, which is kind of the reason that we're getting the blessing to go ahead and try it out. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Emily Braley. I manage NV Rides, the volunteer rides network in Northern Virginia. We have 4 counties. And this is going to take a lot of pressure off of us. I would say a huge percentage of our calls looking at the greater DC area come from Prince William, probably because there's not maybe as robust as maybe Arlington, where we don't get many phone calls. So we're in Arlington, Loudoun, Fairfax, and Prince William. Prince William demand is very high, and so I think this is going to take pressure off of us. So I want to say I support this. We drive people with seniors and disabilities, so this is going to be huge. This is going to be way more convenient. A lot of the reasons we get calls are people find that they can't really access a bus easily. So this is going to be huge. What would be, and looking at the broader region, what are the measures of success that you could consider that maybe, because if this was everywhere, I probably would be out of business, right? So, how could this expand? Where do you see this going? Is this a temporary measure and it's going to become so popular you're going to bring buses back? What are successful measures that we could use to maybe get this? I could advocate for this in Fairfax, perhaps, or Loudoun.
I mean, I don't know. I think so. This is where I think what we would say next would be probably nothing more than myself and Perrin's opinions, as opposed to agency policy at this point. But I have zero interest in us, either in a large way or a total way or anything like that, getting out of the fixed route transit business, right? Like, that's what we do. It's what works for us, and it's the most efficient way of doing things in the vast majority of cases. But this is another tool in our toolbox to be able to either dip our toes into an area without a massive financial commitment, right? You can see if the demand is there, right? But we're not going to be looking at, like wholesale replacements of routes. That's not, we're set up to do buses. We want to do buses as city buses, as it's meant, classic fixed route transit is. That's what we are interested in doing. And I think that on one hand, you maybe have maybe the people who hold the purse strings, who are maybe even somewhat more enamored of it than we are, right? Well, because in their mind they see, okay, so I can cover this amount of area and this costs me the same amount of money or less, theoretically. Well, let's do this then. Well, that's not, no one who got into transit got in it to do exclusively this type of thing, right? Like this is a solution to an issue of an underperforming route that doesn't involve you getting rid of the route and stranding the people who currently critically need to use it. But in my mind, that's its utility.
Yeah, I mean, prior to about 5 or 6 years ago, it was either that or nothing. It was either the bus route or nothing, because you didn't have this ability to run the microtransit. So it's kind of our way of like, does this work? And then we see where this goes from there, understanding that we've got our partners at the cab company that we could work with other things. So there's just lots of space. I mean, this is fun because there's all sorts of different things that we can look at doing in different creative ways, whether it's late in the evening saying, okay, maybe the fixed route only runs till 8 o'clock because from 8 to 10 there's nobody really riding it. We still need it, so then you look at something to cover that period, or on weekends. There's a lot of different ways to look at this, to not always have it to be the bus, even though that is the main purpose of us, but there's other, as we look at being more of a mobility provider and not just a bus system, this is how we are looking at it.
So I don't think, maybe this is a more comprehensive answer to your question than I first mentioned, is that we do not have, not somewhere squirreled away, either in any of our brains or on paper somewhere, some long list of places that we're just like, here, like that doesn't exist. This is very much a proof of concept for us, right? And if this existed, then we would probably seek to put together a list like that. And I can imagine that you might be getting a phone call from me about that, because you have information about it that we don't have, right? In terms of the amount of calls that you have in Prince William County, where they're coming from, issues that you have with folks, things that we could learn from, right? But at the current time, that doesn't exist, right? It's literally this. This is the end game. This is the goal. We're not, looking to rush anything out in short order other than this.
Yeah, this will probably, I mean, I think our demand is so high, I'm not worried about it, but this would completely, like, people would take this over us, of course, because it's more convenient
and it's more, and again, forgive my ignorance, because it seems like you offer a relatively similar service. They would take this why?
Because it is only $1.55 and is guaranteed. We're waiting on a volunteer to pick up your ride, right? So like sometimes you get a call that morning and we're like, we didn't have someone, you know.
Okay.
We
but yours is free completely,
ours
correct?
Is free, and not means tested, so completely free. And it's done by the volunteers.
Right.
So I'm not worried. Our number of calls in Prince William is astronomical, so it's fine. But if this was everywhere, I think we would have to almost like work together. But if it were everywhere, I think we would be able to pivot in other ways too. I'm curious if this.
Yeah, I mean, my mind boggles at the concept of this being everywhere because that's just not what we're as an agency set up to do. It's not what we do.
Yeah.
Right.
This is what people want, so that's why I'm.
It's. I mean, I think what it is, and if we found out anything from all of the outreach that we've done, is that some people want this.
Okay.
Right. There are very much some folks that do not. Right. That are just they don't like the way that you would procure a trip like this. They don't like the fact that this type of trip potentially makes them feel like they're a child, like they're somehow asking for permission to take a trip, versus just they show up and it's a time and it is what it is and they do what they want to do, and that makes them feel like an adult. So I think that in an ideal world, if we can continue to offer both, well, then we've served everyone that much better, right? However, in this particular scenario and in the land of reality, I foresee very few scenarios where we're going to be offering both, right, in the same area, because we're offering the Route 68 local or we're offering microtransit. Then we're not being provided the money to do both, right? So we have to live in the land of the real there. Yes?
Sorry to keep interrupting.
No, you're not interrupting. This is the whole point.
Two more quick questions. So my first question is, you mentioned that there would not be a fixed like pickup or drop off. It could kind of be tweaked. One of my questions is, would it be possible to set up a permanent pickup drop off location? And what I mean by that is, I'm working to definitely build up the city, especially our downtown in this particular area. And what I would really like is that as we have our Park Central downtown development, that there would be one pickup location, one drop-off location, as opposed to having people try to drop off randomly, possibly during events, but also when I do try to do larger events, I would definitely like there to be a designated spot. And then my second question is are we able to tweak this proposed coverage zone? Because as I'm looking at it, and again, I'm sitting far away, but it doesn't look like it covers into our eastern division of Manassas Park. And so that would be a concern that I would have as well, is that we're the pilot, case for this, but we're not even able to offer it to all Manassas Park residents.
Yeah, I would say that the short answer to both of those questions is yes, right? The longer answer to both of those questions is the software offers flexibility in its construction for you to be able to set preferred stops, permanent stops, stops for special events. You can certainly do that flexibility in the system, right? That's not going to be an issue. If you wanted to, and if that's what we want to do moving forwards. The other idea about tweaking the zone, and I don't mean this to sound like facetious or whatever, but yes, absolutely. I mean, this whole screen could be green, right? But there's the dollar value that comes attached with that. So our head planner, Joy Walker, in consort with Perrin, has come up with this zone, right, to cover an area that we think is appropriate. You want to speak about
we did that to cover the area that the current route is serving, and we want the demand to dictate where it goes. So we want to start off small and learn from it, and then if we expand it, then we expand it. But we want to see where people want to go to. We want to learn from that. We do have a route that isn't shown out here that does operate a little bit east of here, that operates and swings by Park Place. That route will still be in existence. So part of Manassas Park already still will be covered with fixed route in addition to the microtransit. And then where that zone goes, that really is up to the demands that we get, the requests that we get, and the ability for us to expand beyond that.
I know we have a lot of traffic along the Manassas Drive, and that's really, again, as I'm looking at it, that's really where I would love, again, to see that focus, and again, as it bleeds out into those neighborhoods. But when I look, because again, I'm looking at the 28 section, you know, we have about 4 blocks of 28. And so when I'm looking at it, you know, and you're saying, you know, Manassas Park, I'm really seeing Manassas right now as, you know, kind of benefiting from this. And so it's not a problem, but again, just hoping more that we would have more of this zone in our city.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can definitely be tweaked. And I think that this is, maybe these will be the discussions that we'll get into as time goes by here, because I'm absolutely certain that I could probably have someone sitting right there who would say, who represents the city of Manassas, who's like, this should be a little bit more Manassas-y and a little bit less Manassas Parky.
Well, because when you say that, you know, the ridership is down, I'm just looking at it now. Well, looking at that particular route, I mean, we got all these neighborhoods that are basically right past that line. And so that's why I guess, and I don't ride the bus, so you know I'm by no means a OmniRide expert in regards to the service, but I'm just kind of figuring that if that particular service extended a little more up into these areas, there might be more ridership.
And maybe Perrin can. I also, in full transparency, I do not put together our routes and haven't historically. Certainly I do ride the bus, but I don't know why they necessarily run where they run. I don't know. I presume we look at census tract data and, you know, feedback from our commissioners and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's also for a regular bus route, the ability to run a bus down the street. It needs to be wide enough. We get calls all the time about buses being in neighborhoods and disrupting them, so we have to look at that carefully. And that's where sky is the limit for this, whether the zone shifts, whether it goes that way or that way or that way, you know, that's what this will tell us to do, and we're looking at that.
And I don't know that folks in those particular areas would want to take the bus. I would certainly want to see some data first before we did too much adjustment.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Sure. Yeah, just to piggyback on that point, and on your point about letting demand drive the coverage area. So looking at that, I believe, like, for instance, I may be just out, like literally just outside that zone. So if I were to be outside of that zone where I live, and you want demand to dictate where the coverage zone is going to be, how would somebody like me let you know that, hey, there is demand just right outside here?
I think that's going to come through if, let's say the trip is denied. Let's say they tell you you would have to go into the closest spot. Then we'll probably have to plot those and see, okay, we have 20 people that want it, but they're just 1 block off the zone. Okay, let's just extend it. If we have the resources to cover it, then, you know, maybe that is the type of thing that we look at as far as where people are trying to get it from, and we figure out a way to either expand the zone or shift the zone to be able to do that.
I have nothing to add to that. I agree. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So there's been recently a $39 billion package passed by the federal government for public transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys going to...
We're taking a solid look at it. That was the thing I emailed you about the other day. So, I mean, I think it would be premature for us to say. I mean, we certainly haven't put together an application yet, but it's definitely something that we're looking at. So I don't think I could say any more about it than that. But yeah, I mean, that's very hot off the presses.
Great.
So
I just wanted to have a comment about some of the, you know, competing ride services. I guess, you know, from my perspective, working with people with disabilities, I work with very few people who can afford to take a cab or Uber or any of those things every day or even every week. And so I really appreciate the, you know, the opportunity this presents to people economically to be able to afford a ride. And I think it's the perfect marriage between paratransit and public transportation, actually, because paratransit, you still have to plan ahead. You got to know you're going to go somewhere a day ahead of time. And, you know, and the advantage that I always presented to my folks, you know, with the regular bus is that you can just walk out your door and go like everybody else, or say, you know, but, you know, this is really both of those things.
Yeah, there's an opportunity to commingle the two with this because of the fact that you don't necessarily have to be pre-certified to use the paratransit. Now, the paratransit zone does go beyond what this does, and there are some people that will still have to do that, but those that are within it could choose, okay, I can either get myself certified so I know I've got the trip at this time and do this, or you can just call when you want it and then have the vehicle scheduled.
And is paratransit in this zone already? Is it Manassas and Manassas Park, or is it just Manassas?
Yes, the paratransit zone overlaps where the other routes also operate, so up to Nova, Ashton Avenue, parts of the 67 that are on this route that go down to Park Place and beyond that, or Georgetown South and to the west of Dumfries Road. So it goes on beyond what's on this map.
Okay.
And those travel 3/4 of a mile from the closest fixed route, so the zone is wider.
Yeah, it's
that's
much
the
bigger.
minimum, though, not the maximum.
Right.
Yes,
Legally,
that's
you
true.
always present that like a maximum. And finally, I just want to put in a plug for your giant bus stop signs. Okay, like that's I love
You like them?
your giant bus stop
Okay.
signs. Yes.
Because
I mean,
they're distinctive, or because they're easy to
I teach
read?
people with low vision, you know, and you can't get clearer than bus stop in big letters, black letters against a white background.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful contrast.
True.
The teal color was always very visually distinct from other signs. Even if you can't read what's on it, you know that that's a bus stop. So, I mean, it seems like with not just you, but other bus systems have gone to these like little round things.
Yeah, the little lollipops they call them.
Yeah, a little lollipop. I mean, I guess they're fashionable now, but what kind of information can you get on there? The print's real tiny, and the shape of them is distinct.
It's a fair point.
But just throwing that out there.
Yeah, one of the things that we noticed when we did change out the bus stops on the western side, it was a little bit smaller than we had anticipated it. So we're learning from that as we continue this and rebrand
visually they've disappeared. They're just in.
Yeah, so we're looking to make it bigger or doing something different with it.
Yeah. It's an iterative process,
yes.
right?
Evolution.
Yes. Yes, sir.
I just need some clarification on the question that Lamar asked earlier. So if I'm east, first of all, I can't see the map that closely. Where is the starting point in Manassas Park? That first little dot there.
Oh, that's the VRE station right
That's
here.
the VRE station?
Yes.
Okay.
So
anything east of the VRE station, if I were to call for service, I'd be told I'm not in the service area, or would I be told, come to the VRE station, we can pick you up there?
I mean, probably both,
yeah.
right? Yeah, the answer would be yes, right? So, like, we cannot service your ride from where you currently are, but if you come into the zone, because it's not based on where you live or anything like that, it's just whether or not you're in the zone.
Yeah, the other route that we do have running, it circulates through here,
right.
So we do have some service this to here, yeah. So we go around Park Place.
Yeah. So you would have to come into the zone, and then we would be able to service your trip.
So fixed route to Microtransit.
Yeah, absolutely, and the reverse is also true. If you're looking to come over, you're looking to go to Woodbridge, you're going to end up at the hub, and then you're going to have to get a bus from there over to Woodbridge because the zone does not incorporate.
Yeah,
that.
and technically the zone does go here. This is our hub.
Right. Yeah.
So the hub, it actually does go here. It just didn't get drawn. So it's not like we dropped off and then have to make your way over.
Yeah, that would suck. Yeah, so that's apologies for drawing that poorly, but yes, it incorporates the hub.
You don't drop and roll.
No.
No, none of that. None of that.
I had heard that the hub might be moved over to where the farmers market is.
We're looking at a couple different things. The city and us are working on an opportunity to improve the hub where we are. We've kept it where it is just because the county had discussed about doing some improvements back in there as well. But the city has expressed interest in us being closer to the railroad station. We'd love to be right in front of the Manassas Park VRE because that's just perfect for multimodal connections.
Manassas Park VRE?
I'm sorry, Manassas VRE.
Manassas,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
So I misspoke. We do technically have a hub at the Manassas Park VRE, but the main hub is we want it to be at the Manassas VRE. We have looked at the farmers market parking lot. There would have to be a lot of retooling of it to make it conducive for a bus to turn around through there. So we're looking at some other opportunities, and we'll see where it could possibly.
I love that location a lot better than where it is now. Too far of a walk to get to Old Town right now.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
So, I mean, we're obviously, this has been wonderful. Oh, that clock needs to be moved forward now.
Yeah.
Mr. Beveridge, go ahead.
You know I was.
Well, you sat on your hands pretty good up until this
Raymond
point.
Beveridge, I'm with the City of Manassas appointee, the Prince William Commission on Aging, and right now, as I have done for many years, I overwatch Manassas Park for aging issues. First off, on languages, I appreciate what you said about languages. I'm going to lump it together. Of the 15 square miles that make up the two cities, there are 32 languages. And we're already getting it at the Manassas Senior Center. someone asked for Tagalog, which is Filipino, and it's like,
yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing to consider, right? But yes, that will be covered in this service.
In the you referenced it, Joe, at one point in one of these other meetings. In the Dusty strategic plan, I got a 3-inch thick binder. If we ever get back to that, there was the shift to business centers, which was some of the route alignment that occurred the last time around, particularly in the other 4 routes, because it's picking up, like now we have Evergreen, that's gotten real popular. One I'm watching is where Did Lake is on Breeden Avenue. That's a bigger complex than I thought it was going to be. They were talking 1 building, it's 3 buildings. So that will eventually be one of those centers of business, because centers of commerce, centers of business, I think is COGS, Council of Governments phrase. Anyway, in that strategic plan, and it goes back to Park Place, there was, when you have points of aggregation, if there was a frequency and demand, let's use Park Place. It's just a little up out of the zone. If there was the frequency and demand at Park Place, would that become a fixed point down the road?
Yeah, because we do have a bus stop right now outside of the Park Place that would not go away with us, because that other route would be the one that serves it. So yes, I think there are opportunities to make that a fixed point, whether it's because that's an easy enough access to go in and do the roundabout there in front of there to make that a place. That's where the paratransit picks up people, and that's where we used to serve it when the old Manassas Park route used to flex off route. It would go in there. And then Breeden, to your point, the proposed change to our Route 67 would go right past Did Lake. That's in the actually in the package.
Yeah.
There's another route that's not on there, but it's in the presentation, shows what we're going to do to tweak that route a little bit.
See, what I enjoy about that Route 68 is there's a bus within that 1/10 of a mile of my house on King Carter Street. I got a bus by Calvary, I got a bus by Kirby. It's like I'm right there. The transportation is going to also be a question that is in the current community health assessment survey being conducted by the Community Health Coalition Greater Prince William, which is UVA, Community Health, and Santara, and the Health District. And yeah, I think you guys know I've got both feet in that thing too. But as that data evolves, I want to make sure that you get it, because that is, it's set, it's a question, there's like 3 parts to it, but how do you need transportation to medical, then what do you use? So that'll be good data, and particularly as we're looking at the flex route and microtransit. The hub. As a City of Manassas guy, I beat up my council on a regular basis that yes, it should be by VRE. Let's use the logic. Is also your Metro Connect. Is not only the 5 routes of the local between the 2 cities, but the Metro factor. And I mentioned it to Joe, and I sent it to Holly and Perrin to you. The 50% design plan for the judicial complex was presented to the Board of County Supervisors. I sent it to you.
Okay.
Guess what's not on the plan for that anywhere in the judicial?
No hub, huh?
No hub. But 2 parking garages, and I've already been asked, are we going to have to pay for that by one councilman? And I went, you're the councilman, not me. But as we look at that, because yeah, that is the logic as the spring car.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the way it's going.
Yeah, and we're all in favor of going over closer to the farmers market.
And over at Wellington too, and of course the independent living that's over there. I've already, since this has been on the change route, they said, how come we're not getting microtransit? I said, patience.
And they'll still have a bus route. We'll keep the 67 still going.
That's why I tell them. Yeah. I said, you're all part of the current loop.
Yeah.
Patience. May eventually, all 5 routes might be microtransit. Who knows?
Tell them we're the canary in the mine over here.
Yeah.
We survived.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, certainly, this was never meant to be like a prescribed 9 till 11 type thing. So, certainly, if folks have asked their questions and they feel like they've gotten reasonable, non-terrible answers, then by all means, feel free to exit stage left. And if not, then you have another 9 minutes to ask them, and we're happy to answer whatever you would like. I do just want to finish by saying that Mr. Beveridge just outlined a few points that in some cases, we don't determine where our hub is. We have to go where people ultimately allow us to go, and that informs a lot of the stuff that we can do regarding service headways, coverage zones of this, that, and the other. So we don't do these things in the dark. We don't do them in a blinkered way at all. We try to do everything that we can possibly do when it comes to coverage areas and to service modes to be able to put out there the best possible service that we can with the money that we have to do it, right? We could sit here all the rest of the day and come up with bajillions of ways in a financially unencumbered way to improve the service in this area, but we don't live in that way. So, we certainly are not interested in, moving away from being a fixed route bus company. That is what we do. This is a complement to that, not a replacement of it. We're here to preserve the service for all of the folks that we can that use it on a daily basis. That it's been wonderful to actually to get out there and meet them whilst they're doing stuff, meet people where they are, and to kind of get an idea of why folks are doing what they're doing, but also retain those people as best as possible, but then give the route the opportunity to grow, right? And that, I think, is currently what it lacks. We could maybe tool around the edges a little bit with information pieces, like you mentioned, ma'am, and certainly we look to do that. But I think that we could potentially attract, entirely new people to the route, if we have that more flexible way of accessing the service. You mentioned maybe like with teenagers, they're very savvy with this type of stuff, and it's something that might work out better. And I hopefully that everybody can see if they are in agreement with what we're doing or that they're not, that it does come from a good place, and the place that it's coming from is trying to be those good stewards and to serve you guys as well as we can. Marichal.
And I want to thank staff. PRTC staff has done a fantastic job today of explaining everything, providing all of this information. I think this is wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, too.
All right.
Did you send me that image? That one right there?
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. Yes, I will send it to you as soon as we get back to the office.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, man. I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because this is.
I gotta need a little.
No, you have to, because